Hello again. This is Chris Lee and Stuart Lackey at Southeastern 14 here to talk some Kentucky football. Stuart, hope you're doing well. Welcome back to the show.
Great to be back. Thanks for
Well,
having me.
kind of, you say it with such conviction.
Oh yeah.
Well,
Still
hey, look,
still licking the wounds after last Saturday.
I'll give you a different take on it. Okay.
Okay, let's do it.
We'll find an optimistic spin here.
There you
First of all, if you're interested in advertising with the channel, caroline.smith at Southeastern 14. TCU played Georgia last year in the national title game and lost by 58.
Yes.
Kentucky played Georgia, lost by 38. So the way I see it, Kentucky's 20 points better than the national runner-up from a year ago. Isn't that how this works?
I love it. Thank you. I was
Yeah.
hoping you were going to attach some meaning to this show, so that's great. I think there's some statistics we can get in and maybe try to explain a little bit of what happened, but I think on full display was Georgia's talent that appeared to kind of be in question by many up until last Saturday, and I think they answered a lot of the questions with conviction.
Well, look, we had a little non-serious fun off the jump here over that, but there actually is a point in there, and it's that Georgia has done this to good teams time and time again. You just don't ever know. They can be kind of lackluster for a half against somebody and then do this. And I don't think it's really, well, yes. Does it say something about Kentucky is maybe not belonging with the college football's elite right now? Does it say anything about Kentucky being anything other than a good program? I don't think it does. I think this is still a good team. It's not a great team, but I think Kentucky's still got a lot to play for going forward.
Well, look, the Cats are 5-1 and have a great opportunity to play another great team this week in Missouri. We'll get into that in a second. But I think for Kentucky fans, Chris, the thing that was really kind of hard to digest on Saturday was Mark Stoops' team has not taken a beating like that in a long time. In fact, I think the last time Kentucky gave up that many yards was actually to Georgia in his first year. And then there's that dissonance. It's like, well, sure, Georgia is the better team. Georgia is the number one team in the country right now. But is Kentucky really that, far removed from the product that Georgia has on the field? And Saturday night, the stars aligned, and unfortunately, Kentucky just did not respond in a very tough environment, and it got away from them very quickly. And really, I mean, there were a few things we can point to, in the first half that there were some bad plays, there were some mistakes, there were some really bad penalties. But would it have changed the outcome? And I think the answer is most likely no. So again, it's that dissonance, I think, for Kentucky fans to digest, or hard to digest after a loss like that.
I'm reading our show notes that you wrote for this, and in it says Bulldogs took it personally. I'll let you unpack that one for a moment.
Yeah, I think, again, leading up to the game, a lot of national media was focused on, is this Kentucky team for real?
Yeah.
Do they have a chance to pull the upset? And on the other side of that, Georgia took a lot of criticism because of some of the way, or the games that they played and the way that they performed up to this point. You look at some of the games against South Carolina, against UAB to start that game. They just did not look like a typical Georgia team, and I think they prepared like national champions to go out and not just beat a good Kentucky team, but send a message to the country and to all doubters that they are in fact, still an elite program and certainly worthy of that number one ranking until they're proven and someone proves otherwise, right? I think they've won 23 games in a row at this point.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I think they did that decisively. I think that's your clear SEC favorite going forward. I mean, the good news for Kentucky is it's not going to have to face Georgia again. There are some plenty of good teams on the schedule, though, and we'll get to one of those in a minute in Missouri. But defensively, what did you see that went wrong for them? I know Carson Beck kind of had a field day. Look, Brock Bowers, nobody covers Brock Bowers, so I sort of exclude him from the conversation. But what did you see that you didn't like there?
To me, the pressure or the lack of pressure that Kentucky was unable to get on Carson Beck was somewhat of a surprise. I mean, if Beck certainly had a field day, 389 yards passing. We know for the most part he looked very comfortable in the pocket. I don't think Kentucky touched him all night.
Hmm.
Certainly, I think we had the Cats had one tackle for loss. Georgia didn't give up any sacks, and again, you look at how Kentucky has played up until this point. They've been able to get that pressure, and that defensive line certainly looked to be one of the better ones in the league before the Georgia game. And Georgia just handled that pressure. Even when Kentucky did mix some things up front, Beck was still able to slide up in the pocket, manage that situation, and find receivers to throw the ball to. And the other thing that surprised me was how the secondary responded. It wasn't that just Brock Bowers did his thing, which he was going to do. It was the fact that there were a couple of routes where he was just not even covered. And so,
Yeah.
credit to Bobo, the offensive coordinator for Georgia, on calling a great game. And Brad White on the opposite side, credit, said the same thing. Just said we were not prepared and did not respond in key situations. So I think just an all systems failure from the Kentucky side to be able to handle that kind of environment and just that level of talent.
All right, we'll start unpacking some better things in a moment, looking ahead to Missouri, but it's still a couple things to wrap up. Penalties
Sure,
was the thing we had on the show notes. That's been an issue for Kentucky at times.
sure.
Look, and I think I'd love to see the penalty splits in this league, home and road, because I think sometimes crowd noise and things like that present some challenges. But what did you see that was concerning in that regard?
Well, you had mentioned last week, again, the crowd noise could be a factor, and certainly Georgia at night is a special place. But there were two really bad penalties by Jagger Burton, one of the offensive linemen for Kentucky. One was just a hold at a very bad time, and then another was an offensive or a personal foul when the play was over, and that had no consequence on anything. That was really detrimental to Kentucky's offensive momentum in the first half in a couple of series. And then on the defensive side, Deion Walker, after the play was over, and credit, that kid's a smart kid, and he hustles. I think there was some confusion maybe that the play might not be over. He too committed a personal foul and just an egregious kind of block in the back. And again, bad timing, right? That would have gotten Georgia off the field, I think, at that point. And so again, would it have made a difference in the outcome of the game? Most likely no, but certainly not the best timing for any of those penalties. And Kentucky's better than that. I think, you look at the week before, 3 penalties, for 25 yards against Florida. I mean, that's how you win. That's how you win football games in the SEC. That's certainly a big component of it.
Another big component of what's going on is Devin Leary. It just seems like we've been unpacking concerns about him for a while now. I
Wow.
guess the
Yeah.
bad news is be nice if we didn't continue to do that from a Kentucky
Right.
success standpoint. Number two, um, you can look at history. Obviously, there are better performances there. So it's all in how you want to look at it. How do you see this one?
Right. Well, I think where he is right now, he's got to own what's going on this season, and it's a record that's been on repeat for 6 weeks now, and his accuracy issues still continue to be a problem. And he missed a wide open Tavion Robinson in the first half of that game. Again, would have Robinson scored on that play? Maybe or maybe not, but would have set up Kentucky in a great position in Georgia territory. And again, in that environment against that team, you don't want to say, well, if these 2 or 3 plays would have gone differently, the outcome of the game would have been different. You just can't make those kind of mistakes on that stage and have a chance to win against that team. And it's all magnified, right, when that happens. And he hasn't been consistent. So now we're in a situation, I mentioned last week, the kid is, I think, a really good talent. He's only 6 feet. We talked about some of the vision or the height issues in terms of getting balls batted down at the line of scrimmage. Does that affect the play calling with Liam Cohen? Do you see more kind of tunnel screens? You certainly can throw the long ball. Not a lot of crossing routes, not a lot of slants that you're seeing. And so does Cohen make some moves here? Like, do we get him more in shotgun? Do they get him more on bootlegs? Or out on the edges to make plays. He's really not that kind of player. So it's going to be interesting to see if Liam Cohen can dial up and maybe simplify things to make Leary more comfortable. What's interesting, the explosives, Chris, Kentucky actually in the SEC is one of the better teams at explosive plays through the first 6 games, but that doesn't help the team, when they're trying to march down the field and convert on third downs and stay ahead of the chains. And so again, we all believe that Devin Leary has the talent to be an effective SEC quarterback, but the reality is he's second to last in passing yards, and you just can't win like that. And so it doesn't get that much easier the rest of the way with Missouri, Tennessee, Alabama, waiting further down the schedule.
Yeah, and you're going where I wanted to go next. The good news, and it took us 11 minutes to get there, but there is plenty of good news. I think 10-2 is still on the table. Would I
Sure.
bet for 10-2? Probably not. Maybe 8 or 9 is more like it, which is still a pretty good season, but it could happen.
Yeah.
I think there's the
Right.
talent there. The passing game has not gotten on track. The defense is there. The one that I count off the table is Alabama. I mean, could they win that
Yeah.
one? Yeah. Would that be smart to predict it? Probably not. But you start with Missouri, which also came off a disappointing loss, so in a different way. This
Different
one's
way.
in
Yeah.
Lexington. The way I see it, and I've seen a good bit of both teams. I think I like Kentucky's defense better. I definitely like Missouri's quarterback play better. But even in that, you saw Brady Cook had that streak of 366 straight passes without a pick.
Yeah. Impressive.
Yeah, and then he threw 2 in the second half. So
Right.
against an LSU defense, this is awful. Now, I think Brady Cook
Awful.
was a guy that I think there was probably too much criticism on him preseason. The fan base, I think, kind of wanted Sam Horn to win the job. That didn't happen because from everything I heard, Cook was clearly the better player. But here's where I'm
Right.
going with this. Brady Cook then came out and played like an All-American for the first
Right.
5.5, 6.5 games, whatever it was. And then I think he's a good quarterback, but there was a little bit of maybe coming back down to earth in the second half of the LSU game. No, they're going to
Right.
have a headache to cover Luther Burden. So I think Kentucky probably is a disadvantage from the quarterback position, probably an advantage from the defensive unit, although Missouri's is good too. But I
Right.
think the biggest thing, this one is in Lexington at Kroger Field, and that's meant a lot in the SEC so far.
Yeah, home teams certainly have had an advantage. Look, Brady Cook is, statistically one of the better quarterbacks in the SEC. Again, at this point in the season, you look at the schedule that they've played. You mentioned that, not an all-star cast. Leading up to the LSU game, LSU's defense isn't good at all. And though Cook had his way with things certainly in the first half, Missouri's defense they did lose their star rusher or their star linebacker for the second half of that game. Would it have made a difference in the long run? I don't know, but they certainly can, be extremely explosive on offense. And it starts with Brady Cook, and it also starts with Luther Burden, who's just a phenomenal talent. The kid is extremely impressive, and a physical player who obviously can get yards after the catch and break tackles. And so, again, going back to Kentucky secondary play against Georgia, a couple of those guys are dinged up. Jalen Geiger not playing. Can Kentucky get Luther Burden on the ground? Can they keep that passing game in check? And again, it could be a shootout in Lexington. These two teams these games are always close. Kentucky's won 7 out of the last 8, but I think Missouri comes into this game with an edge and maybe a sense of belief that they can get what would be a very small upset in Lexington. And so for those reasons, I look for this to be a higher scoring game, but which favors Missouri, quite frankly. Kentucky, I think, wants probably to try to get their ground game going with Ray Davis, who's again just setting or not setting, but leading many of the categories, rushing categories in the SEC. So again, who's going to show up? You've got a Missouri offense that's played really well, that really hasn't played anybody, right? And so Kentucky's defense has obviously been very successful to this point. How effective can Missouri's passing game be against Kentucky? Can Kentucky get pressure on Brady Cook? I think that'll be something else people are going to watch for.
Well, you led with some things there that I wanted to bring up next, and I don't know how much you got to watch of LSU Missouri. Again, I watched just about all of it,
Yeah,
and
most of it.
Jaden
Yeah.
Daniels kind of stole the show in that one statistically, and coming back from the rib injury. But where the game started to flip, Missouri's up 22-8, and just LSU cannot get stops. And LSU started running Logan Diggs a lot and sort of changed the flow and the tempo of the game, picked up some first downs, kept that defense off the field. And I thought that's really, he was kind of the underrated piece of where that game started to flip. Well, guess what? Kentucky's got a dude that can do that, except he's better. His name's Ray Davis. And to me, that's a big part. We didn't spend any time talking about Ray Davis the first 14 minutes of the show, which was a reflection
Right.
of how last week went. But that's been
Yep.
the only time this year that Ray Davis hasn't come up in
Yep.
like the first 2 minutes. And I think
Yep.
that's where I talked about the advantage. I think this is where Kentucky's got a big one. Missouri's given up 4.2 yards of rushing play, taking sacks
Yep.
out of it, which is decent but not great. And Ray
Yep.
Davis, I mean, look, he's already ripped apart one good run defense, and I think
Yep.
he can do the same here.
Well, he leads the nation in scoring, 12 points per game, total touchdowns with 12 total points scored. He ranks 4th in rushing and 11th in rushing yards per game. We can go on and on. He leads the SEC in touchdowns. He is Kentucky's best offensive player. And, while the fan base and the coaching staff and the program waits for this passing game, hopefully to catch up at some point this season to the potential everyone believes, it is Ray Davis's, team offensively. And again, that's what I believe. I think that's the opportunity Kentucky can get him going in the run game, in the pass game, and then hopefully open up, some of the receivers to give Leary, an opportunity to put together what we've yet to see as a complete game. But I back to Davis, I agree with you. I mean, you've got to go with the guy that got you here, and he certainly is that type of performer. So to your point, LSU was very effective in the run game, and so Kentucky, I think, will try to assert Ray Davis again this week as a part of the offensive plan.
Any finishing touches on the Missouri-Kentucky game before we move on to our final topic here?
Well, again, both of these teams, I think, believe that their program is better than the other. They're at this tier, so this really is a pivotal game for both of these programs this season, Chris. I think you could see, if Kentucky were able to win this game, like you said originally, a 10-2 season is on the table. Conversely, if they lose this game, then you could see more of an 8-4, 7-5 scenario, depending on the rest of the season. Missouri's the same way. Kentucky, if they win this game, they have a bye next week before they host Tennessee the following week. So I know Mark Stoops would love to pull out a win here against a very good opponent, go into that bye week with a 6-1 record, which is a great place to be. So again, still a lot to play for. This is a big one for the Cats.
All right, the final topic, as you may have guessed, NIL, everybody's favorite topic, and Mark Stoops had some definite opinions on that, as do a lot of coaches. Let's unpack that and tell me what you thought of what he said, because I don't think he was wrong.
Well, yeah, and again, everything is context, right? So the way that all this set up on his coach's show Monday night with Tom Leach, Mark Stoops responded to a caller who basically said, "Will Kentucky ever, eclipse a team like Georgia?" And Stoops, obviously extremely competitive, I think did a good job of handling that caller and that sentiment for the most part. And then I think at one point said, "Hey, look, we've done a lot. We've beaten Florida, 4 out of these are his words, 4 out of the last 6 years. We've managed to be consistent over South Carolina and Missouri and put together some pretty impressive win streaks against that kind of that lower to middle tier echelon of SEC teams. Beaten Tennessee twice, which hadn't been done. So, credit to Mark Stoops and what he's done. I don't think anybody, would dispute that. He's the second most tenured coach behind Saban now in the league. So he's obviously done some things right. It went a little bit further though, and he challenged the caller to say basically, if you think it's that easy, come and jump in my seat. And with that, the show went on a little bit further. Then they came back to the NIL thing, and Stoops essentially said credit Kirby Smart and the team that they have, and he's bought a lot of good players, and used the word bought. And so here we are now in this era of NIL, Chris, where 3 years ago that would have been an NCAA infraction, and there have been massive investigations and death penalties and all that kind of thing. But now here we are, and it's amazing in that little amount of time where the game is, and so that was the context of what Stoops said. But put that back to Kirby Smart. And Kirby Smart, I think, is a class act. I think, responded and said, hey, Mark and I are trying to win the same way. Everybody's on the same page, essentially. So he kind of diffused it. But certainly, I think it fired up a lot of people. And the thing that I thought, Stoops could have done a better job at, he basically said, if you have those kind of players, you can buy those kind of players. That's the result you get. Somewhat dismissive of his own team. And so that's, the timing of the comment, and maybe who might have heard that, i.e. his own players. I'm interested to see if there's any carryover to that. I think that'll be interesting this weekend.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, he said the quiet thing out loud.
He did.
He's not wrong. What you said is something I hadn't considered, and I think you're right about it. But pet peeve, I wish we'd stop calling it NIL. I mean, these guys are not out filming commercials for the money they're getting, A, and B, this has been around a long time. It's just legal. I think a good analogy someone put was it's like before gambling was legal, gambling went on, but when you made it legal and open up casinos and things like that, the business just exploded because now it's easier to do it without threat of being punished. So I think that's a good way to put it. That's the world everybody's living in, and we're still really not that far along in trying to figure it all out.
Yeah, he made the comment, Kentucky fans pony up. Those were his words. And after Georgia hung 51 on the Cats, maybe not the best timing to do that. So again, I think it'll be interesting to see how the players respond, and the coaching staff has been a little bit, came to his defense to try to rally the troops, so to speak, and the fans to create a really strong environment Saturday night against Mizzou. I think it is interesting though too, while we're on the topic of NIL, I didn't know this before this week, but Missouri, and they've made some really good strides in recruiting. They've got some good players come in, but the state of Missouri, I don't know if you knew this, they passed a law relative to NIL to make those donations tax deductible, which is really interesting. I don't know if any other SEC school or state, if you will, has passed a similar law. There may be some, but that was the first time I'd heard that. So in the state of Missouri, if you want to support the athletics at Mizzou, you make your donation through essentially the scholarship fund, not a collective, that is tax deductible. So it'll be interesting to see how that evolves, and if other states in the SEC adopt a similar type of legislation.
Yeah, and look, if you want to start getting into the weeds and the minutia of NIL laws and ways and things, I'm going to look like a moron, but I will tell you this. That's the one that you commonly hear come up, as Missouri's got a big advantage there because of state laws. I think you did a good job of outlining part of why. I'll give a shameless plug for one of our shows. Our Thursday episode, which you can find if you're seeing this after the fact, which we pre-recorded. We do a live show every day from 11 to noon Central. We've got a guy on there who's been a coach in this league. He's been on the staffs at Ole Miss and Alabama. His name is Tyler Siskey. He talks a little bit about the NIL and some things he'd change. And one thing that he brought up is that, hey, I think Charlie Baker, unlike some past guys that have run the NCAA, has done a good job of actually asking people what they think and trying to maybe find I'm paraphrasing here, common sense approach to doing this. So look, this is going to change after a while. I don't know what it's going to look like. I think pay for play is here. I mean, in no other, in what other thing in America do the people that run the thing keep all the revenue and not pay the people who produce the product? No, I mean, they get scholarships, and that's not an entirely that doesn't entirely do justice to it, but you know what I'm getting at. So I think
Sure.
that's here to stay. That's kind of an un-American concept, not letting those guys get some of the share, but the
Right.
how we figure it out, and the laws here one place and the laws there another place, and
You're right.
no guardrails or few guardrails and standards across the board for everybody. We're just kind of living in chaos
It's
till we
just
figure that. I think it will, but
yeah.
yeah, but here we are.
Yeah, it's the wild, wild west, and again, those comments. I mean, every coach is feeling that in the league, and it's no longer the quiet subject. It's out there, and it's okay. So it becomes a legislative process. You're going to have to see more regulation come in just to create an even playing field. But yeah, it's certainly a wild time. One more note, just kind of some more fun facts going into the game against Mizzou, and if I could, Chris, this is the fifth time Kentucky has faced one of college football's top receivers since Brad White became the defensive coordinator back in 2019. Kentucky is 0-4 in those games. So just something to think about as we talk about, just interesting matchups. Receivers could tell the tale, and on both sides. Can Kentucky get Ray Davis going? Can they get some kind of passing game going? Missouri's defense is not good. Kentucky's defense needs to respond. Unfortunately, it's against one of the best, passing games in the league this week. So it will be fascinating to watch kind of that chess match this Saturday night.
We'll be here to talk about it next week, as we always are. Stuart, appreciate you. It's fun to have these talks. I think the script will be a little different next week. I don't know if it'll be a Kentucky win or a Kentucky loss, but I don't think it's going to be 51-13. So, but I think it's going to be interesting. I'm in all seriousness, I'm really looking forward to seeing these two teams play, because I think it's a pretty even matchup on paper.
Well, I think it sets up the rest of the way in the East, right, for the rest of this season. And so Tennessee certainly still there. Georgia is going to do its thing. And so I think Kentucky, Missouri has that opportunity to reassert itself as maybe the second or third best team in the division. And again, there's some pretty big bowl implications riding on this game for both teams. So,
all right, Stuart, thanks for joining us.
All right,
we'll
man.
catch you next week.
Thank you, my friend. Take care.